No bullets are going through there. Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. We're learning Maseches Kesubos Daf Kaf Vav. We're actually going to be going down to the Mishnah halfway down on Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. This is partially Rabbi Resnick actually chose to stop there for some reason. I don't know why. But also we're going to be adding, as mentioned, we're going to be adding a little bit more learning over the next few days in order to make sure that we can get to Shabbos to learn Sunday's block, because we're not going to learn together on Tisha B'Av itself. And then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week, I'm out of town. I'll be in Eretz Yisrael and Eretz Hashem, so I'll just be sending audio recordings every day. What? Probably not, just based on the logistics, but you can join me, no problem. All right. Says the Mishnah, 10 lines down, Chav Vav Amud Aleph. I thought that's what were you talking about? What? Yeah, no problem. Come with me. I have no problem.
Save me a spot.
Okay, no problem. We'll get a tender. Tanya, the Brisa writes 10 lines down. Same sugya, we're still discussing how we can verify that a Kohen is a miyuchas. And says the Gemara, Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Kshem shetruma chazaka lekahuna. Just like truma can establish a chazaka for a Kohen, kach ma'aser rishon chazaka lekahuna. So too, ma'aser rishon is a chazaka for kahuna. Ma'aser rishon is eaten by Levim. That's a little strange. We're going to discuss that in a minute. And the Brisa continues, V'hacholek bebezdin, one who gets his portions of food from bezdin, ein chazaka. Also a difficult line to understand. Who is the firmest guys in the room? They're dayanim. The dayanim say you deserve a portion, then you deserve a portion. What are we even talking about? Okay, so question number one, the Gemara says is, hold on one second. Ma'aser rishon de Levihu. If Ma'aser rishon goes to a Levi, then how can you bring a raya that a Kohen receives a Ma'aser rishon and therefore he's a Kohen? It doesn't make any sense. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. What's going on here? Tanya, the Brisa writes, Truma la Kohen, Ma'aser rishon, la Levi divrei Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was of the opinion, as we classically understand, that Truma goes to a Kohen and Ma'aser Rishon goes to a Levi. However, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer Ma'aser Rishon af leKohen. Ma'aser Rishon can even go to a Kohen, not just to a Levi, but also to a Kohen. Says the Gemara, Amor da'amar Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah af leKohen. When does he say that it's even to a Kohen, or whenever he says that it's even to a Kohen, leKohen v'lo leLevi mi amar? Does he say that a Kohen gets Ma'aser Rishon, but a Levi doesn't get Ma'aser Rishon? Ad kedei kach, that if a Kohen gets Ma'aser Rishon, we can assume he's actually a Kohen from that alone. Even if you want to say that the Kohen also gets Ma'aser Rishon, it doesn't mean he exclusively gets Ma'aser Rishon. So to this, the Gemara says, in fact, that is the case. First long line, Chav Vav Amud Aleph, Basar de Kansinhu Ezra. So this is another sad historical notice. We were talking the other night, as the Jews were leaving Bavel to come back to Eretz Yisrael to rebuild the second Beis HaMikdash with Ezra. Ezra tried to convince any Leviim to come with him, and none of them were willing. So it's It's an unbelievable. You read, it's like, hey, I'm not judging. It's just so hard to understand. It's so hard. Not one Levi showed up. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah gave a knas that they could no longer eat the Ma'aser Rishon.
There's only like 40,000 people like that, right?
I don't know the numbers. I'm just saying that you couldn't find one. I know Levim are hard to find. So are Kohanim, but like couldn't find one. That's true. We have a bunch. Right. So that's what the Gemara says, Basar de Kansinu Ezra, that at that point, yes, there was a time in our history.
So
Yeah.
You read the Rashi last night.
Yeah, that what?
Our
Oh, I didn't read the whole Rashi last night, actually. Yeah. Arba Ribo. So the Gemara says that at this point in history, there were no Kohanim. There were only Kohanim who ate Ma'aser Rishon. And therefore, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, if a person was eating Ma'aser Rishon in this time period, it meant that he was a Kohen. Okay? Says the Gemara, all right, I understand where you're coming from, but Vidilma Ikru v'yohavule, maybe it just happened that a Levi would have received it, and therefore, maybe there's at least a small chance that the person eating this Ma'aser Rishon was in fact a Levi and not a Kohen. So maybe it's not a Raya Brura that this person's a Kohen. Says the Gemara, you're right. What's the case we're talking about? What is the case we're dealing with? That the father of this person was known to be a Kohen. Ooh, somebody's talking in Shul, they're like, yeah, that boy in Shul, he thinks he's a Kohen. He's a Ben Grusha Ben Chalutza. He's a Halal. He's not really a Kohen. And then what happened? And then when he's down by the granary where the Kohanim are to collect food, he picks up some Meiser Rishon. Oh, so now we understand why in this case it verified what his initial status. What I guess they undid the rumors. The rumors were that he's Ben Grusha Ben Chalutza. Kamash Malan that he's not because he got the Meiser. Says the Gemara, Levi, we know he's not a Levi because the Lav Levi, who a Levi can't get food down there when he's a Levi by the Beis HaGranos. And Ma'ikal Amemar, you're going to say is a Ben Grusha Ben Chalutza. You can't say that a Ben Grusha Ben Chalutza was going to receive Meiser. That makes no sense at all to receive the Meiser Rishon. And says the Gemara, distinguishing between two shitas, Lomi Boya Lemanda Amar Meiser Rishon Asar Lazarim. Obviously, according to the shita that says that Meiser Rishon is not allowed for a Zar. Obviously, if the person had been a Ben Grusha Ben Chalutza, he never would have received anything. A Zar is not allowed to have for sure. Ben Grusha Ben Chalutza are not allowed to have. But even according to the Shita that says a Meiser Rishon is edible for someone who is mutter lazarim, hani mili lemispak behu. That's true. Even if it's mutter for a person to eat Meiser Rishon as a Zar, that's true if he's like at the house. Okay, here's a little bit of Meiser Rishon. Aval b'toras chaluka lo yoavale. That's not possible. They would never hand it out to him. B'haraya. That's how we know that in this very narrow sliver of history, when there was a knas on the Levim at the times of Ezra, that had there been a person who was eating Meiser Rishon, by definition, it meant that he was a Kohen. And that's why the Gemara says by Meiser Rishon that was the case. Let's analyze the second part of that brisa. So we're 2/3 of the way down, halfway through the wide lines. And the Gemara picks up on a little bit of the brisa that we started with. Remember, we had said that if a person gets their portion of Kohanic food from Bezdin, that it doesn't count. Says the Gemara, "V'acholek bebezdin eina chazaka." If bebezdin lo havya chazaka, if by Bezdin it doesn't count, so then heicha havya chazaka. What's better than Bezdin? They're the highest standard. If you get a psak from a small time rabbi, okay, no big deal. But you go to the Bezdin, they give you a psak, the conversation's over. It's nothing to talk about. So that's the Gemara. You're absolutely right. What case are we talking about? Amar Rav Sheshes Hachi Kamar, the case we're dealing with when we say that we don't trust the Bezdin, or not that we don't trust, but the Bezdin isn't strong enough to allow this person to be established to be a Kohen, is in the following case. Acholek Truma b'nichse aviv im echav bevezdin. A person is giving out, the Bezdin is giving out food to the children of a man who died, the inheritance, and he is one of the brothers, but the Gemara doesn't say this. He's only a brother from one of the mothers, and his mother is not necessarily a miucheses, and says the Gemara, eina chazaka. So it's not necessarily the same thing. The Gemara says, Pshita, that should be obvious. If they have different mothers, if the cases are different, if they have different mothers, it shouldn't be the same. Says the Gemara, that since his half brothers are able to eat the Meiser Rishon, maybe he should too. And or the ones whose mother is also a Kohen Meyucheses, Kohenes Meyucheses, he can eat. But but this guy whose mother is not a Kohen Meyucheses, he should be selling it. Yes, it's assets. It's something that you get as part of your Yerusha, but you're not allowed to eat it, you have to sell it. That brings us to the 2 dots, 5-6 lines from the bottom of Chavav and Aleph. The Gemara continues, Rabbi Yehuda Omrei in Malin Lechuna Al Pi Echad. We saw this machlokes in our Mishnah that we learned on Shabbos, or it was today, maybe yesterday, not yesterday. The Mishnah that we learned on Shabbos, at the bottom of Daf Chav Gimel Amud Beis, we learned a machlokes about how many Eidim are allowed to verify that a Kohen is actually a Kohen. And we saw 2 shitas that were very similar. Rashbag, Hainu, Rebbe Lazar, their shitas are almost identical. So the Gemara is going to try and figure out what was it that their shitas were similar about. That the question is whether or not an a taina on the status of a Kohen can come about from one person. So that, and therefore, what would the machlokes be? The Rebbe Lazar savar ir erchad, the Rashbag savar ir trey. That according to Rebbe Lazar, we could even have a concern raised about a Kohen even with one aid, and Rashbag holds it has to be a minimum of 2. That can't be, because ha'amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Divrei HaKol in ir pachos mishnayim, that a person is not able to have a taina on a Kohen unless there's 2 aidim. 1 aid is not enough to have a taina. So therefore, that can't be the difference between Rashbag and Rebbe Lazar. Ella, what is the difference between Rashbag and Rebbe Lazar? Says the Gemara, Lahacha b'maya skinan, a very lengthy case, but we'll get to, it's not complex, it's just a lot of words. And that is as follows. What's the case that we're dealing with? The machlokes Rebbe Lazar and Rashbag. The muchzak lon be'avua dehai de koinu. there's a particular person, let's say his name is Chaim. We know his father's a Kohen. And then we heard a rumor about Chaim that he was a ben Grusha ben Chalutza, and we demoted him from his status as a proper Kohen to an invalid Kohen. And then and then an aide shows up and says, actually, I know he's a Kohen. And because we now have Eidus, then we promoted him yet again. He's now able to be a Kohen. And then Vasu Beitrei, then two Eidim come along, ben Grusha uben Chalutza. Then we have two Eidim come and say, no, Chaim is actually a ben Grusha ben Chalutza. And then Ve'achtine, we demote him yet again. And and then we have one more aid that shows up and says that he's a Kohen. Now, in this flow of events, there are two Eidim that don't give Eidus at the same time, but they have the same Eidus. So the flow of events was, he's a good Kohen, he's a bad Kohen, he's a good Kohen, he's a bad Kohen. All right. So we have a lot of different testimonies. The two Eidim who said he's a good Kohen were single Eidim that gave their testimony, one at 3 p.m. and one at 5 p.m. Let's say the Dugma. So the Gemara now says, third line, everyone agrees that you're allowed to be mitzdarif Eidus from the single aid, from the Eid Echad who gave testimony at 3 o'clock that this guy is not a ben Grusha or ben Chalutza, and with the guy who gave testimony at 5 o'clock, no problem at all. We can add them together. So what's the machlokes? Here, the Gemara is looking through a political window, and we're saying, is this a zilzul of a bezdin for them to keep flip-flopping on their shita? Tanakama savar kevan de'achtine lo maskinan le. Once a bezdin demotes a kohen from good status of kohen to bad status of kohen, they first embraced the rumor that Chaim was a ben Grusha ben Chalutz, and they said you can no longer do the avoda. So then lo maskinan le, then we don't promote him. Chayshinan lezilusa de beidina. That's the shita of the Tanakama. However, Virashbag Savar, and also Rabbi Lazar, Virashbag Savar, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel has a little bit of a different shita. Savar, Anan Achtinan, we're the ones who demoted him, Anan Achtinan, the Anan Maskinan, and we're also going to be the ones who promote him. Whatever the Eidus says is what we do. We're not looking through a political window. We're not concerned about the image of the Bezdin. Ulezilusa de Beidina lo Chayshinar. Fascinating. Just think about the implications here. According to the initial shita of Rabbi Lazar or the Tanakama, we're concerned that the Bezdin will look like they're flip-flopping. And because of that concern, once we demote a Kohen, we cannot reinstate a Kohen. Which means that even though we have Eidus that indicates that the Bezdin made an error, we will not change our ways. That's the shita of Rabbi Lazar. We will not change because of Zilusa de Beidina. We're afraid that the integrity of the Bezdin will be put into question. So that's a political window question. It's not a halachic issue per se, because halachically speaking, there are witnesses that testify that this guy is a valid Kohen. And the other Eidim who said that he's a ben Grusha ben Chalutza were wrong. But out of concern for the Bezdin looking like it has a lack of integrity, we shut that down and we say, sorry, you can no longer do the avoda in the Beis HaMikdash because of the Zilus of the Beidina. Rashbag says, no way. Rashbag says, we are a halachic Bezdin. People will be able to see above the fray. They're not going to be worried about the flip-flopping of the shitas. And therefore, if we get an Eidus that says he's a ben Grusha ben Chalutza, we demote him. If we get Eidus back that says he's fine, we promote him. We always follow whatever the Eidus says, all the way to the bank, even if it makes the Bezdin look a little weak. A fascinating machlokas. What?
It says the opposite.
What's the opposite?
No, it says the opposite of the Bezdin being weak.
Joe, so yeah, you're a party line with Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Yeah. It's not so simple. Great question. It looks like, I mean, I'm kind of reading into the words a little bit in Rashi, Dibur HaMaskal, third line, it seems like this Bezdin, see, again, it's not a very good deal, but it seems to be that it's the same Bezdin. Also probably true, but his question still stands. But his question still stands. I mean, we've already seen Gemaras if it's a city with 2 Batei Din versus a city with 1. Yeah, Lamaisa, it's probably talking about the same Bezdin. I'm just guessing, a partially uneducated guess. But it's a fascinating machlokas. Like, when do we allow politics to interfere with the halachic process? The image of the bezdin is crucial. We always have to be machshav of bezdin. And all of a sudden, oh, this happened during COVID. How could you stay open? How could you close? Everybody's in Russia, So these things came up in the OU. We dealt with this extensively. The emails and we're one organization. The emails we got about, can you please dismantle that? You think we run the bezdin in your city? We don't run any batei din. That's not the job of the OU. Okay, people are people. So they sent in funny emails. We laugh about them behind the scenes. Fantastic. I got a good one today. I'll tell you later. Okay. I know. I guess I gotta stop talking now. I'm gonna now. I have to edit my first video. My first video in 1,000 shiur. I've never edited. I'm still not editing. I'm sorry if you sent that email. Okay. Maskiv lo Ravashi. Ihachi. If you're going to have a political consideration, afilu trei nami. Who cares about the case of Eid Echad? If you have a political concern, that you have political. Who cares what this? It's a politics question. It's not a halachic question. Says the Gemara. You're right. Really fundamentally, what are Rashbag and Rabbi Elazar dealing with? They're talking about combining one aid and another aid echad into one testimony. It's connected to the following machlokes tanaim. The Tanya. You're not allowed to combine edus until the two of them appear as one. So says Rashi, Ad sheyiru shnehem ke'echad es ha'edus la'afuke echad ha'omer befanai helvehu ve'echad omer befanai hodelo alav. They have to kind of seemingly be there at the same time. And Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha omer afilu bezeh achar zeh. This is true even if it is in sequence, that we still accept their edus. The next part of the Brisa reads in the Tanakama's name, and their edus is not miskayemes bebezdin ad she'idu shnehem ke'echad, that they have to be giving testimony together. Reb Nasan Omer Shomin Dvarav Shel Zeh Hayom Uchshiyavu Chaver Lamachar Shomin Dvarav. When do we join together? Okay, even a day's gap is not too much of a gap. Remember that there's Drisha v'Chakira, where let's just talk about Kiddush HaChodesh for just a moment. Where exactly was the moon relative to the sun? How close is it to the horizon? How many degrees off the equator? Whatever the questions were. So says Rashbag, he's basically a party line with Reb Nasan. So that's the machlokas. The Gemara concludes this way: the machlokas, Rashbag and Reb Elazar, is whether or not we allow hitzdarfus of two separate edei echad. That's the shiloh that they're dealing with. Rashbag is a mekel, I guess, or machmir. Rashbag, who's got to say this? Rashbag allows a two edei echad to have separate edus combined, and Rebbe Elazar does not. The new Mishnah reads a little bit more than halfway down on Chavav and Beis. We're going to the next Mishnah, which is halfway down on Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara, Ha'isha shenech b'shabi de ovdei kochavim. If a woman, this is not the case that she's captive, she was put in prison. So let's say a woman's put in prison, b'dei ovdei kochavim, and the warden and all of the people who work there are ovdei kochavim. So al yedei mamon, if the reason she's in jail is because of money, muteres labayla. We don't assume she'll be violated if the reason she was put in jail is because her family owed money. Because we assume, I guess there was an understanding at that time, that if a woman was violated, it would change the dynamic between her and her husband, especially if he's a Kohen. But even if not, and they would not violate her. If it was about money and the Goyim wanted the money, the Akum wanted the money, then they would not violate her. And we can therefore assume halachically muteres labayla. But al yedei nefashos, if she was put in there because of nefashos, we'll see at the end of the Gemara today what that means. But basically, if she's there for a life sentence, then they don't care about her. And then asur labayla, then we assume that she was violated. The Gemara opens with a qualification. Amar of Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, Amar Rav. This is true in a time where the Jews were takif on ovdei kochavim. Basically, it means where the Jews had an independent government. But in a case scenario where the akum, where the goyim were in charge, afilu al yedei mamon asur labayla, then even had it been that the reason she was in jail was only because of money and not because of nefashos. A couple of moments ago, we said in the Mishnah that if it's because of money, we assume that they won't violate her. That's only true when the Jews are in charge. But when the Ovdei Kochavim are in charge, then we assume that even if she was arrested because of mammon, we assume she was violated in prison, and then she'd be Asur L'Baila. We're going to see right now Masiv Rava. The Gemara says it's a question of Rava. Really, we're not sure what happened with Rava, and we have three versions of Rava. This is the first version the Gemara presents of Rava. We're 8 lines from the bottom of the page on Chavav Amud Beis. Masiv Rava. He asks a question. Hey, Rabbi Yossi HaKohen Reb Zachariah ben Akatzav, al Bas Yisrael, Shehur Hina be'Ashkelon. The word Shehur Hina means that she was used as collateral. It's not exactly the most pleasant usage of a person, but she was used as collateral. The mob came along and they said, oh, you don't have your money? No problem. Give me your wife and you can have her back when you pay. So what do we do in that case in Ashkelon? Seemingly her family was concerned because when she was actually freed after they paid back the money and they got the woman back, her family distanced themselves from her. But there were Eidim, they were apparently there watching, I guess today's version of a camera, and she was not violated. The Chachamim called a family meeting and they said, you're not treating her the right way. If you are willing to believe the fact that she was given as collateral, then the witnesses saw that she was used as collateral. The witnesses also saw that she wasn't violated. And if you're not willing to believe that she wasn't alone with a man and she wasn't violated, then you also shouldn't believe that she was used as collateral, but we know she was. Says the Gemara, what's the question based on this brisa? Ashkelon, at that time in history, Diyad Ovde Kochavim Tkifa al Atzman. It was the Goyim who were in charge of that particular property. Now, if you'll recall from a few lines ago, we had said as a qualification of our Mishnah in the name of Rav, that when the non-Jews are in charge, even if she's only arrested because of finances, we assume she was violated and therefore asura l'bayla. And what's the diuk? The katani we have in this brisa. What did we learn? Top of Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, that hur hina'in. And what does that imply? That nich b'shalosh, she would not be asura to her husband had she been imprisoned. At least that's the diuk from this brisa. So which one is it? Do we say that when the Ovdei Kochavim are in charge, that a woman is always assumed to be violated if she's put in prison or not? It says the Gemara, Hu adin afilu nechbasha. Really, the example of the brisa, it could have been nechbasha as well. Why did the brisa use the case of hurhana, that she was taken as collateral, and not the case of nechbasha? Because now we made an incorrect inference. Says the Gemara, Ma'isa shahaya kachaya. That's just what happened in the story. It wasn't meant to be for a diuk. Sometimes there's a phrase or a story or a concept that's meant for an inference. This is not that. In this case, we fairly assume that the reason why the case was nechbasha, or the reason why the case was horhana, the brisa at the bottom, the brisa that Rabbi brought in the name of Rabbi Yossi HaKohen, the reason why it was the case of horhana, because that's actually what happened. It wasn't a theoretical case. It's what happened, and it got codified in a brisa. All of this is version number one of Rava as it relates to our qualification in the Gemara. So let's see another version on the top of Chav Zayin Amud Aleph on the second line. Instead of Rava bringing this as a question on Rav, he brings it as a raya to Rav. How so? And the Gemara now quotes the whole brisa in full again. Hey, Rabbi Yossi HaKohen Reb Zachariah ben Akatzav al Bas Yisrael Shehur Hina be'Ashkelon. There was a woman who was put into prison in Ashkelon. B'richkua b'nei mishpachta, and her family distanced themselves from her when she was brought back to her family. They thought she was violated. However, ve'edeh me'idin aleh shelo nisra v'shelo nitma. However, all the edim who were there, they said that nothing happened with her. And Amru Chachamim, they said to the family, you're not being fair. Imatem ma'aminim shehur hina, ha'aminu shelo nisra v'shelo nitma. V'im ma'aminim shelo nisra v'shelo nitma, al ta'aminu shehur hina. Manavshach, you should trust this woman. It should be the case. Stop treating her like she's a second-class citizen. Says the Gemara, Ashkelon daide mamon haba. In that case, it was because of money. The taima de edim meidinosa, and the reason why we paskin the way that we did is because there was edim. Ha'ein edim meidinosa lo. The halacha would be different. My lab loshna hurhana v'loshna nechbasha. Maybe we should say that there's no difference between a woman who's being held as collateral and a woman who's being put into prison. Lo, not correct. Hurhana shiny. The case of hurhana is in fact different. In Horhana, we're going to be potentially lenient, but when the Ovdei Kochavim are in charge, we're not going to be lenient as it relates to a case of Nechbasha where she's imprisoned. And for the final presentation of Rava, we're about a quarter of the way down on Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. Ika de Rami la Mirma. Some say that this was in fact posed as a question, similar somewhat to Masiv Rava as we started with. on the bottom of Chavav Mebez, but not quite the same. Tanan, what does our Mishnah say? Al Yedei Mamon Muteres L'Baila. That's our Mishnah. Our Mishnah assumes that a woman who is arrested and put into prison because of money that she owes, we assume that they will not violate her. Hold on one second. We're a minhu. We have a conflicting source, which is the brisa from Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi, this time, the Gemara doesn't quote the whole brisa, but we've learned the story twice already. Asks the Gemara about Ashkelon Daidei Mamon. In Ashkelon, even by Mamon, we should assume that she was violated. B'Katani, time of the Edim Idinosa, or Ein Edim Idinosa lo. And answers the Gemara, Mishari, Amar Rav Shmuel Bar, Rav Yitzchak Lo Kasha, Kanshi Yad Yisrael Tkifa al Ovdei Kochavim, Kanshi Yad Ovdei Kochavim Tkifa al Atzman. It depends. One brisa, the brisa of our Mishnah, is where we assume, like Rab made the qualification, that we're talking about a case where the Jews are in charge. And when the Jews are in charge, if a woman is arrested because of money, we don't assume that she will have been violated. Masha'en came the brisa of Rav Yossi, which speaks about Hurhina. That brisa was talking about a time when the Ovdei Kochavim were in charge. And for the last little bit of tonight, we had said in our Mishnah, what about the case of Ayidei Nefashos Asura, that if a woman was arrested under the threat of punishment of death, she was arrested with capital punishment. So then what do we assume that to be the case? Amarab, Kigo Nashe Ganve, the wives of thieves. And we assume that Nashe Ganve, that this particular woman is going to be mufkar once her husband is punished. The Levi Amar, Kigon Ishto Shel Ben Dunoi, this is the wife of Ben Dunoi, he was a murderer. And the wife of Ben Dunoi had this halachic status that she was basically mufkar, and we assumed that people would violate her. However, it's not just that they have to be arrested, they also need to have a verdict, or I should say this is a machlokas. Amar Chizkiya b'hu shenigmar dinan lehariga. When do we say that a woman is treated as though she was violated when her punishment is capital punishment? That's only after she has the final jury, the final judge's decision or the jury's decision. But it has to be a final psak. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, af pi shelo nigmar dinan lehariga, even if there isn't a final psak, that she's in fact guilty, but once she's in prison for such a claim, we assume her guilt to be absolute, and therefore we assume that she was violated and asur to her husband. We'll stop right here, Mirza Hashem. Tomorrow night we'll pick up right here at this new Mishnah on Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, and we'll try to overlearn a little bit, and we'll try to push, see how far we get. Wishing you all a beautiful night.